One, and I could tell you, folks, they're giving me a little bit of a leeway to do a gimmick of a podcast, and here we are in the studio and happily joined by the voice of Prince Edward Hockey, George Matthews, coming aboard. George, how you doing today, my friend?
Well, you know what, Mavs? It's great to be on with you, and having when have coming back from the States where I had worked and had met you for the first time, I knew you and I would see eye to eye on a lot of things. So it's great to be on with you as you venture into this new territory of a podcast, and it seems like a lot of people are going in that direction, and for a lot of people, they're having a lot of success with it. So good luck on this ride for you.
Well, thanks, brother. Now, the big news this year was you are now a member of the Prince Edward Island Sports Hall of Fame. Can you take me through the emotions of getting that call and through the process, kind of a big a big capper on
Well,
40 years still going?
yeah, and that's about 40 years and still going. About 28, somewhere between 28 and 2,900 broadcasts. That's about like 8.5 years of broadcasting every night. When you take a look at that number, and as I get into my retirement years, and I look back at where my life has certainly gone on by, and you wonder where everything was. What did you do with your life? And I'm going to say, well, I spent a ton of it in the rink, obviously. So yeah, so they gave me a phone call. Would be a year ago last December. And Mavs, to be quite honest, as I do here on the island, I host and I MC a lot of sporting activities here, or some. And I thought they wanted me to MC their dinner. And when the gentleman who had an English accent, who I was not familiar with, I thought it was a bit of a joke initially. So anyway, he went through the process and told me the number of people who had supported the application, and um, well, I was shocked and stunned, and it was a little bit of emotional as the phone call was going on through, because very quickly you try to take a look at why you're being nominated and have been nominated, and all those years of being involved in broadcasting. Over this conversation was going through my head as I was talking to this gentleman, and so then he told me that I couldn't tell anybody, which the only people that I actually talked to, he gave me four or five people who had actually nominated me. So I went and thanked them for putting their name forth in the application. And it's not something that I ever thought that growing up that I'd ever be a part of the PEI Sports Hall of Fame. I'm going in on the media side. Certainly wouldn't have gone in for an athlete on the athlete side for sure. So anyway, you know what? It's a nice topper, as you said, and just being recognized for the history that you've gone into a certain direction in sports. To be a part of that, it's certainly appreciated, and something that I'm very happy to receive.
Well, when you talk about athletic prowess as a member of the PEI Sports Hall of Fame, so many of those names come out of Summerside. What is
Yes.
it about Summerside that brings in such athletic achievements, both off the ice, on the court, in coaching, in broadcasting? What is it about Summerside that creates athletic excellence?
Well, certainly as far as an athletic community per capita in Atlantic Canada, it certainly is a significant part of that landscape because of, if you look at the history and now the building that they've got in Summerside, which is second to none for its population in Canada. In Summerside, Mavs, it seems that growing up, Charlottetown is the bigger of the two communities, and in order to compete against Charlottetown, where I currently live and very happy. I think it's a terrific city. Um, you always had to put forth that extra effort to try to equal what they were doing in the capital city area, or in fact to do better. And it's just that sports is very big in Summerside. It's probably the thing that it's known most for, to be quite honest. And they have the facilities. As far as the arena now is concerned, terrific building. Even in the NHL, when I was working there at the time, people would come and tap me on the shoulder in the media room and say, and tell me so you're from PEI, and I would say yes. And have you ever been in the building in Summerside? And for the most part, I would have to say no because I was working away at that time and hadn't seen the finished product. But they would go on and on, even the NHL guys, and say how good the building is in Summerside to be able to view a game, watch a game, or broadcast from it. So I knew they had gone in the right direction in that regard. So still today, they have to push hard for everything that they get. Uh, Nothing is easily given to them. They're competing with other venues here in the province, and they've done a great job, whether it's on ice or 20, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, early in my broadcasting time frame. They would host a number of softball championships. They had the Little League Championship for Canada for a decade, I think. So they've always pressed hard. Bill Skierman would be a key piece of that as well in the early years, and they've backfilled with great people as well to continue on the legacy of what Summerside has brought forth on the sporting side over the last 30 to 40 years. And it certainly punches above its weight, and they've got great sports facilities there, whether it's again on the baseball, softball side, and they've got a beautiful arena as well. So they're going to continue on with that mission statement, and I would think moving forward they'll have continued success.
Well, I'm glad we're talking a bit about sports legacy because whenever we'd be in PEI, Smitty would always talk about the 91 Canada Games and how that 91 Canada Games jacket is still a treasured memory for everyone around PEI. The Canada Games are coming in less than a week to Charlottetown. When you look at the impact of that type of sports legacy, what do you see moving forward out of these games that this generation can hold on to for the next 20 to 30 years?
Well, as far as the opportunity for these young athletes from PEI being the smallest province and not big expectations most times you're looking for a few medals here and there, but I think just to have it's a lot different time frame when PEI hosted the last Winter Games in '91. Charlottetown's a much different city, for example. So many places to eat and restaurants and hotels now compared to 30 years ago. It's a tourist destination city. So I think it's going to be it'll be a more comfortable as far as the people coming in. They're going to have options and choices and so on. UPEI has a couple of major building additions now, 6 and 9 stories high for residents that will carry on forever as part of the Canada Games legacy in 23. You've got renovations, new buildings in Rustico with Olympic-sized ice surfaces. There's all kinds of venues that are getting upgrades and so on, which are obviously needed to host such an event like this. But I think, again, just the great memories of seeing the best young athletes in Canada participate in your home province, to see your local athletes go up against the best in Canada as well. I think that's going to be the lasting memory here on PEI. They certainly enjoy sports in this neck of the woods. There's no question about that. And I think you're gonna see a Canada Games, which I know some of the people in charge, that'll be well run, and I think it'll be well received by most people involved.
And you brought up a name that's close to our hearts is Bill Skirman, who you
Yeah.
talked about him in Summerside, renovated and made something amazing there. I got to meet him in Amherst when he had that place
Yes.
humming, and then the Eastlink Center over the last 18 months under Billy has really, really taken off. What can you say about what Bill has done over his legacy towards not just PEI, but I guess in the region of sport, in the
Yeah.
fact that he also was in Amherst for such a long time.
Well, I mean, Amherst it was a great story. Summerside was a great story as well. I think he was on the coast to Lunenburg or down on the southern coast of Nova Scotia for a period of time, but wanted to come back to PEI. And Billy is he's old school, and there's expectations that the job is to be done right. And the one thing with Bill, of course, over the years is that he would always there was never a time clock in the day, and whatever it took to get done on that day, what had to get done. His expectation was the working staff, along with himself, would try to accept the challenge and get the job done. And he was always pushing to make things better, and every place he's been, he's made things better. And he was certainly waking up the city of Charlottetown when he came here in August to get the building in working order. He's run into a bit of a health problem here right now, so we've missed out on him in the last month. He won't be involved with the Canada Games at this particular point, but he was a game changer in the 3 or 4 months that he was here in Charlottetown. He just continued to push the envelope. But for Billy, it was all about the passion of doing it right, and feeling good about what was accomplished when it was all said and done. But he was not one to just give directions and give out orders and then walk away and then expect it to be done. He was there rolling up the sleeves, and he would work relentless and endless hours to try to get the job done. And that's why he has been successful every place he's been. And here in Charlottetown, in the few short months that he's been here, in 3 or 4 months, he's changed the arena around in about 180 degrees. So hopefully he's going to be able to come back and complete what he wanted to do here. So he would be, but bringing back the history of what you said about Summerside, Bill would be one of those early guys that made Summerside got the catchphrase Canada's tournament town. And for Billy, he all the I mean, for they had the World Softball Championships in Summerside. I mean, so you went from small scale to the world, hosting the world, and sports tourism. The city could see the benefits of having facilities and sports tourism, and Billy was leading that charge 40 years ago when most communities didn't know what sports tourism was all about. And Summerside could see the benefit of it, and they've continued on with that ever since. And Billy was one of the pioneers of that, without question.
I'm glad you corrected me on that, because he's crammed 18 months of work into 3 or 4. I'm thinking he's there for a year and a half with everything that he's done at the East Lake Center. It's only been
Yeah,
since
no,
August,
no.
man. I tell
Yeah,
you.
so he was only there for 3 or 4 months, and since then, of course, obviously, it's a much more comfortable building to go into. And I remember when I first came back, I heard the response that with the new branding of the Islanders, that you would just open up the door and the fans would come. That's not even close to being the reality of today's world. When you put on a sporting event, it's a 3-hour entertainment package that hopefully your product on ice is competitive enough to be entertaining. But in all the down times of a 3-hour hockey game, you have to have in-arena entertainment. And Billy was a big part of that, trying to get the new speaker system in. Now, Mavs, when you come back, it'll be a different environment when you've seen, or what you've seen at the East League Center in the past. You can actually hear the audio feed now inside the arena. They've got a nice digital scoreboard that fits the landscape that now has a bunch of karaoke and video pictures, and everybody wants to be on the big screens, and it's pretty entertaining at times as well. So Billy was a huge part of that. He could see that these things were a requirement. New press box for Mavs when he first comes, and when he first comes into the building. Now, I know that having traveled around the 18 buildings in the queue at least a couple of times, no longer will I be willing to do that. But I know a lot of people complained about the press box on the island at the East Link Center in Charlottetown, many calling it the worst in the league. And it's gone from the worst in the league to none better now. If you don't like this press box and where it's located and the seating arrangements and your viewpoint, then you're in the wrong business. So they've got a great media box at the East Link Center, waiting for Mavs to arrive in at some point, and one that they'll enjoy calling the game from.
It was always interesting when I had to do rhythmic gymnastics to get over my color commentator to get to a slice of pizza at intermission but now the George
Yeah.
Matthews gondola is complete, and let's talk about the product on the ice. It's been the cycle of junior hockey with the Islanders this year. What are some signs that you point to say, you know what, future is going to be bright? This is just how junior hockey goes.
Well, Mavs, and you've been around the game here in the Atlantic region even longer than I have as far as major junior hockey is concerned. And there are cycles, but for Charlottetown, some way, somehow, with Jim Holton, who is there's none better in the CHL, obviously two-time Quebec Coach of the Year, GM of the Year, CHL Coach of the Year last year. And he's really coaching this year, believe me. He's doing an outstanding job in Charlottetown. And the record is not great, but in Charlottetown, they went through 5 years of having the best record in the entire Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. Their winning percentage is better than anybody's. over the last 5 years. Never won a championship, but always came in and around that 40-win season for 5 straight years. They never had a reset or a rebuild. And as in part of that is that Jim, very knowledgeable in the game, knows he's got to have great goaltending. And whether it's Matty Welsh or whether it's Ellis or the current set of goaltendings that he has now, and Robillard, he's always had strong goaltending. And Frankie LaPena, the franchise in Charlottetown here for a year, he's had great goaltending, and as a result, the team is starting to compete again. But the reset was this year. They stretched as long as they could. They went 5 years. They were in the semifinals 2 years ago. They were in the league final last year. Couldn't get over the top either time, but it's been a winning product. And as a result, the fans have supported it pretty good. They're somewhere around 25 or 2,600 a game, I think. For this per capita area, the Charlottetown region is around 87,000 is the latest release of the greater metro area out into the the rural areas of the province. So they've supported it pretty good with the numbers that they have. And right now they're in a bit of a rebuild without question. They've got a couple of second rounders and as well a couple of free wallets that Jim seems to be able to pick up from Ontario with his history in the Ontario Hockey League. Young Michaud is on fire right now. The second half coming back from an injury. Young Marcus Kirsi is the top scoring 16-year-old defenseman in the league. They're both at 16. Lucas Romeo, 17-year-old forward that wasn't happy with his opportunity in the Ontario Hockey League, has come back, and he's a top 15 rookie scorer in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League this season as well. So Jim is putting some pieces back in place. They made some significant trades at the trading window. They've got a first rounder, which they've rarely ever had. That's coming back in futures. They've got some second rounders coming back in futures as well. But Jim is he's really pushed hard here in this second half to make the playoffs. And at home right now, they're 5-1-1 in their last 7 games, and they're sitting 14th overall, tied for 14th in league play. But they're playing very competitive. They went into overtime against Victo 2 weeks ago, top 5 team. They went into overtime against Quebec City, a top 5 team. They beat Halifax at home and lost in the final minute at home against Halifax in 4 of their last 8 or 9 starts. So they're competing. It's on the focus of great goaltending, great effort by the club. That's a Jim Holton team, as you would know, Mavs, is that they compete hard. They might not be the most talented team every night, but they work hard. And they've had Jim Holton is on the bench. He's active with his coaching staff. Kevin Henderson, Guy Girard, they're always teaching moments all the time. And I think Jim's enjoying the year as far as the teaching aspect of it is concerned. He's got some more talent coming in from past drafts over this next summer that have committed to the Islanders. He's got some draft picks as well. So they're going to turn the corner here. And they're like every other franchise where you have to reset, rebuild. And Jim's doing a very nice job of it to this point.
No question Jim gets the most out of the orange when he's talking with players. Is it a sign of the times, though, now that for teams to go from being good to really good, is having that pipeline to Ontario to find that diamond in the rough junior A kid or that kid that's not really gelling with his OHL squad to make a trip out to the Q and be an impact player?
Well, you know what, Mavs? Gatineau has done this for years, right? Right next door to Ontario. And Gatineau, the Olympic, they've used that resource of being not far from the Ontario border to filter their lineup with players from Ontario. And of course, for Charlottetown, they never had that opportunity before until Jim Holton arrived. And Jim, he's got 4 or 5 players from Ontario again this year. And as I use the term free wallets, they're not free actually, depending on the situation. Some there's transfer money that has to be transferred from one hockey association to the other. But as far as giving up assets are concerned, you don't have to do that. And so, Jim has that track record with a lot of Ontario Hockey League teams and as well with coaches that they feel that they can come to Charlottetown. They're going to get the opportunity to get better. And Jim is going to, again, be focused on making him a better player and also a better person. Jim doesn't he doesn't put up with an awful lot of off-ice distraction, and he wants a solid dressing room. He wants a dressing room where the players are buying in as a team and they give back to their community. If you've got issues, you're not here on PEI for long, and so parents know that there's not going to be very many issues within the dressing room of where they're sending their son to, and that's all in the coaching and the direction of Jim Holton and team management. And it's been successful in drawing players from Ontario. It'll continue that way, I would think, as long as Jim is here. He sees it as an opportunity to get back on the winning side of the ledger with more wins than losses, and he used it for the last 5 years. And a lot of Maritime Quebec-based players have been in the Charlottetown roster, over the last 5 years. But he's got some nice pieces from Ontario that eventually come here, and he turns them around, and they, in fact, turn to pro hockey, and they become players in the American Hockey League. Some have seen action in the NHL, and they weren't seeing all that much time in Ontario. They had an opportunity here in PEI, and for some, it's worked great.
I'm glad we get to talk about turning pro, because George, I want to go into Columbus a little bit, because let's just chat about 10-year run with the Blue Jackets. And I know it might have been a little while ago, but you never forget the first. Can you take us through the emotions of stepping into and calling an opening face-off in the National Hockey League?
Yeah, and Mavs, you know what? I had 13 years there, and it went. I can't say it was quick, because it wasn't. I enjoyed every minute of it. Um, Firstly, as far as calling your first game is concerned, I would have been happy to call just one game and then come back to the East Coast. And in fact, my first contract with Columbus was just for a year, because, I had a pretty good setup back here in PEI, where I was teaching school. I had a pension that I was paying into. Had the summers off, and when it came to the broadcasting at CJRW in Summerside, Spud 102 eventually, that we followed every team on PEI right through to the Maritime Championships. So we obviously covered the Capitals initially, and then moved on. If Charlottetown would defeat Summerside, we'd go into the Maritime playoffs. So we just kept going and going and going, and whether it was senior hockey or junior hockey. So it was a pretty good run, and we always had fun at the end, because you were never out of it until the season came to an end for everyone, really. So I had that going for me. So I never thought that I was going to stay. And then I ended up getting the Western School Board at the time. They were terrific with me. They gave me 5 one-year leaves of absence, and finally I had to get off the toilet and find out actually what I was going to do. And so I ended up making it a 13-year run there. But the first broadcast, I can remember, it was a preseason game, actually, which is the first time that the Jackets ever played. And I can remember Doug McLean coming up and asking how myself and my broadcast partner were getting along, and whether we were ready to go, and whatever like that. And he was all smiles and whatever. And then as he was leaving, he turned around and he slammed the top of the broadcast location, and he said to my broadcast partner and to myself, he said, "Boys, this is not the minors anymore. It's not junior hockey anymore. It's not here in Ohio that you're doing the NCAA. You're not back in the East Coast doing junior hockey. This is the NHL. Don't screw it up." So that was the vote of confidence that we got from my good friend Doug McLean to start things off. And I said, "Well, you know what, Bill Davidge, who's my broadcast partner, just a terrific human being from my time in Columbus." I looked at Bill. I said, "If this is the only game we call, Bill, so be it." So anyway, we started at that point, and of course the first training camp, and working with college hockey in Eastern Canada, and eventually the American Hockey League for a couple of seasons, and doing a lot of junior. There is a step of an upgrade here without question in the NHL. And then you look at Columbus and you say, well, we've got Mark Denis, who's now broadcasting for the Canadians. We've got Ron Tugnett in goal. We've got Kevin Dineen and players like that. It's a senior veteran team. This could be a pretty competitive team. And then, of course, in the warm-up, I watched the Penguins come out. They've got Mario Lemieux. They've got Darius Kasparaitis. They've got Kovalev. and it goes on. They've got Yager. I said, well, this might not be as much fun of a game as I thought it was going to be because Pittsburgh, they loaded up in their first preseason game. But that is something that I would never forget. And of course, we had our own first win on the road, which was a non-televised game in Calgary. In Game 3, we ended up beating the Flames in a 4-2 game with Rusty Klesla, our number one pick, having a big game on that in that evening as well. We have our first win at home against the Dallas Stars. Was a big win. The first game ever at Nationwide Arena in regular season was against the Chicago Blackhawks. Jocelyn Thibault was in goal for the Hawks, and before I could get out of the first period, the Jackets were up 3-0. And of course, my broadcast partner and myself, we were high-fiving one another and saying, you know what, the Stanley Cup's coming down High Street, which is the main drag in downtown Columbus, and it's coming this year. Of course, we were joking. Anyway, reality eventually set in, and at the end of the hockey game, we lost 5-3. So anyway, there's all kinds of sideline stories, but just the NHL is a great place to broadcast out of. It's actually, Mavs, it's actually easier to broadcast in the NHL than it is in junior hockey. And I say that because of everything's done for you. You just have to show up. The game notes that you have to prepare from are always there in front of you. All the sound effects are there for you that you need. Anything you need as far as interviews, you have people run them down for you. But what you're supposed to do is show up and be ready to call the game and do a good job of it, or at least try to make as limited mistakes as possible and get on with what you're supposed to do. But it's such a great game to call because at the NHL level, what is supposed to happen, for the most part, happens. Whereas when you call major junior, which you've done, it's a little ping pong at times where there can be 4 or 5 turnovers in one sequence of play before it ever enters into an offensive zone. So if you can call, and I tell this to everybody, if you can call major junior hockey with some form of expertise, then there's no reason why, if you want to chase down the dream of broadcasting in the NHL, that's a possibility, because it's actually it's an easier game to call, in my opinion, at the top level, just because of the flow of play.
I like that you bring up you just show up, because I've heard a story of Danny Gallivan when he was talking with Don Cherry, and Danny was always adamant that he just show up right before puck drop. He can do he'll have his energy for it, because he didn't want to be any type of pre-production meetings, because he would refrain. Well, are they going to tell me who's passing him the puck? Because I'm not going to learn that in a pre-production meeting. So, and I've read those NHL game books. I see a lot of stats that are used and handed to you, as opposed to searching it out in major junior.
Yeah, well, any work that you and I do here at this level, anything that I bring forth to the broadcast is I got to do that on my own. Whereas if you work at the time at Fox Sports, they've got their own researchers with 10 golden nuggets for every game. You don't have the time to find all that stuff and research, then travel from one city to another I could have been in 3 cities in 2 days. I can be in Edmonton, LA, and Phoenix within 48 hours doing 3 games. You don't have all that, and then you got to travel there, sleep, get prepared, know your players, know what they're doing. You don't have time to find all the nuggets that are being dished out. Any broadcast now, most fans wouldn't realize that. They think that the broadcasters are doing all this, and they're doing a lot still on some of their own individual notes. But at the same time, they're being handed information to make the broadcast more entertaining at the NHL level. And of course, the more entertaining that you are with play-by-play and backfill with color and information, then you're making it a more entertaining broadcast. If you do that, guess what, Mavs? You've got more people listening. You've got more and watching. If you've got more people watching and listening, you've got more of an ability to charge for higher advertising rates, and everybody makes more money. And that's the whole object of it, is to make it as interesting as you possibly can, get as many ears and eyes on the product that you're talking about, and then have the ability to sell out the inventory and to charge more for it. That's the business.
And I love that you're talking business with it now, because you're the inaugural play-by-play guy for the Columbus Blue Jackets. It's a new hockey market. What were some of the things that you saw in building that hockey market in the first 5 years?
Yeah, and it's just man, it Ohio is a huge football state, and when we first got there, I mean, we'd be driving up and down the interstates, and people would we would have the nicely decorated vans with the Blue Jackets logo and Stinger and a hockey stick, Stinger being the team mascot, and people rolling down their windows and saying, "What are the Blue Jackets? You know, what are Stinger? Who's Stinger?" And initially, that was the case, and in the fun part of it, to go in and be the play-by-play broadcaster for the Montreal Canadiens or the Toronto Maple Leafs, it would be so special because it's an original 16. But having said that, they've had a number of people broadcast for them in the past. Whereas when you go in first, everything is open doored, and you try everything that to possibly get people dialed into the sport and to promote the team, promote the broadcast, and so on. And that was one of the challenges that I really like to be involved with during my time in Columbus. When I left, we had 28 affiliate stations. We were the third largest radio network in the National Hockey League with a product that hadn't won as consistently as we would have liked. So part of the deal, of course, was when you're not winning on ice, so that people are still dialed in and tuned in, is to try to provide them with some energy and some entertainment. And so, with that, I would try to come up with different descriptions in the broadcast to try to make it a little bit more entertaining and to have people say, like, just what did he say? And, so you come up with terms like, holy moly, what a goalie, holy shinny. And I said that the other night in a broadcast, and somebody thought I said the four-letter word as well. But you come up with that, that type of stuff. Lucille, what a steal. Return to center, what a tender. That type of stuff. That makes the broadcast a little bit more entertaining for people, because sometimes the on-ice product is not good enough as a winning product. So what your job is to do is to try to entertain them, give them a few laughs, keep them in focus for 5 or 10 minutes, see if they retain any interest on the product that you're broadcasting for. And if that's the case, if you can keep them for 5 or 10 minutes, they might in fact buy a game ticket. They might buy a 5-game package ticket down the road as you try to draw them in to who and what you're broadcasting for.
And again, you're up against Ohio State football. When did you when did you realize Ohio State football was a religion?
Well, the Buckeyes, which when I was initially there, like, they were a $60 million program 20 years ago. And they paid for every athletic program in Ohio, at Ohio State. And I can remember I flew in on a Friday afternoon last weekend of August, and I got up at my condo, which had a walking park in back of it, over a little bit of a river, and walking through this treed area, coming through a grove of trees, and then I see all these vans, TVs, barbecues in the middle of a high school track, and I'm walking around the track trying to measure off my 4 or 5 miles of I was going to try to route out for my daily routine walk, and I kept going around the track. Well, I only went around once, but I kept going around it, and I kept looking at everybody inside the track, outside of the track. There's RVs. Again, there's beer everywhere, and there's partying going on at 8:30 in the morning. And it's like stunning to me. I've never been at a tailgate party in my life, and I didn't know what was going on. But as I mentioned to somebody else in the morning, so that's just the tailgating going on, and it is like, Mavs. There's nothing like it in Canada that we have. It's like you said, it's a religion. They will come in on a Friday night in their $300,000 or $400,000 RVs, and they'll park them a mile within, the building, the stadium, and it's just to see them. They'll party Friday night. They'll be all through Saturday, and then they leave on late Sunday evening or early Monday morning. And it's outside the football stadium in Columbus. it that holds about 125,000. There's another 250 around it, and there's in the area of about 400,000 people within the stadium, and it's something special, and it you can see why it's big time. I know the Buckeyes are as big in downtown Columbus as the Yankees are in New York City, or the Red Sox are in Boston, or they're major league sports in every way except the definition that they're not pros. Everything else about the Buckeyes would be major league.
And it was just a PEI fella making 100,000 new friends.
It was just amazing going around. Like, I just couldn't believe that people had partied that hard to the point on Saturday morning they might not be able to catch the game in the afternoon. They're going to be it's lights out already. I just said you're going to miss the main event, but it is. It's a fabulous. I went once. The in arena entertainment, the in stadium, the band, everything is big league. The NCAA Division I football, man, it's massive. And in the U.S., I I'm guessing there's probably a 50-50 split. I actually don't know, but I know there's one ton of NCAA football, Division I football fans. To me, it's as big as the NFL.
And one of the things that makes it such a religion and so big, and we've talked about this ad nauseum, is putting a value on local sports. So when you look around Atlantic Canada and Eastern Canada, I mean, what are some of the things that you think need to happen that you would see to put a higher value and emphasis on local sports so that teams and organizations can have an easier job of selling tickets and getting people into the game?
Well, you know what? And that's a great question, Mavs. When I first came back and I met with some of the media ownership groups here in the city, um, and one of the detriments to the Islanders was, as we move forward here, is that the local media coverage is tougher and tougher to get, and out of sight, out of mind for a lot of teams and in communities. And this was here on PEI. This would be certainly one of them. I mean, we've got a major uh, television carrier here that is limited in its sports coverage. Our newspapers today, um, we don't have the immediate updated news of the night previous like we had in the past. And for radio, there's not much mention of what's going on locally a lot of the time. So a lot of it is on Facebook, a lot of it's on social media, and things can happen. And if you don't happen to be aware of your apps and your social media updates, you might miss stuff. And when I first came back here, they said, I was told that the Islanders would never be on radio here on the FM side. And I was quite stunned by that because I had 28 stations in Ohio that were not, they weren't all corporately owned networks. Some were privately owned, some belonged to networks. But there was 28 stations, 28 cities in Ohio that made their living off of local. And it was all about local. They would have a couple of Friday football games. They'd have one late Friday afternoon, one into the 8 o'clock hour on Friday night. They would have a couple of games on Saturday. They would have basketball, and then they would backfill these stations would go from local community programming. Then they would go statewide. They would cover the Reds. They'd cover the Indians, the Browns, the Bengals, and the Blue Jackets and the Cavs. But they would be responsible first locally because all those pro teams had their own platform levels that the locals perhaps didn't have to back up with. But it's gotten to the point that eventually we did get one of the network ownership groups to put the Islanders on for the playoffs, and then for Saturday night coverage, that's all they could handle. And we switched over. We're now in Max 93.1. They want to do all the games, and the ratings are good enough that people are tuning in, and they're there for a period of time. It might be 7 minutes, it might be 10, it might be 15, it might be for the whole two games, or the whole 2 hours of the broadcast. But there is an interest level for local, and I don't think you can deny that people are interested in local. I think local media outlets have the responsibility to try and promote what's going on locally. It's part of the culture of a city. Um, people move to a city to have the opportunity to view and get involved in different events uh, at a more frequent opportunity to be able to do that. Whether it's the Scotiabank Center in Halifax, hosting the World Juniors, they've got the building to be able to do that. There's a responsibility to try and get that for the people of the East Coast of Canada occasionally, and you know, uh, in Charlottetown here, again, it's the responsibility of the community to try to get things done, but they need the support of the media to make it successful. And the media is very significant, in my opinion. Obviously, it's a biased opinion, but if there's no energy, if there's no buzz, man, it's tough to get interest in events. And whether things are being held in Halifax or Charlottetown or Moncton, you got to have media support to make it successful and bring it over the top, in my opinion. And that's where we on TV, what you're doing with your podcasts, your broadcasts as well on Eastlink, what we're doing in the island here with Max 93.1. People are, I mean, it's people are still surprised that the coverage is here on radio because for 20 years it wasn't, and they're just finding it now, and because it's been non-existent, and people are enjoying the opportunity to be able to follow something locally for a period of time to stay informed with what they might have an interest in.
And and I mean, you and I were in the bubble. We know, what this is what we eat, breathe, and sleep. What shocked me was last year in the finals and seeing that French TV was there doing a live hit from Eastlink Center, as well. It looked as if Radio Canada was, you know, covering the game for the game, where it feels like sometimes that the English media outside of those that are connected with the leagues just sometimes fall a little short. I think of Brett Budgell, who was basically the CHL Humanitarian of the Year, and
Yes.
you didn't hear that story anywhere outside of us.
Yeah, and it just, uh, I don't want to be too critical here
Yeah.
because I am in, I work with the various media people here in the province, and it just everybody's trying to do their job, and for the most part, they're somewhat limited because they're not going to go in that direction because of cost or whatever. I just don't understand it why we don't have um, TV coverage here in the province with a CBC affiliate here with a 60-minute supper time show. I think it's just an automatic. It's just automatic that it allows you to fill a time frame that people have an interest in. With our radio broadcasts, to get them on the air, I asked for the numbers last year in a couple of games in the finals to see what those numbers are, because I've always told them that radio would sell here if given the opportunity. And there's TV broadcasts going on at the same time. We're doing radio at the same time, as you said. The French media are in, and I'm not going to tell you the numbers that we had on the radio side because I don't want to. Anyway, they were significant, and they were more than happy with it. And as I told them, I said, just give it a chance. And if you give it a chance, local people will follow local if you give them local. It's as simple as that. And so, I to me, I'm down at this point as I finish up on my broadcasting side. I understand totally the importance of local people. You can get the Maple Leafs coverage, the Habs coverage, the Raptors coverage, the Blue Jays coverage on 10 or 15 different platforms and outlets. If you want to do that, you don't need local to be able to do that. They can give you a quick update on stuff, but man, local is about local. Focus on it and give the local sports teams a chance to grow with interest by promoting of what they're trying to do. That's my opinion.
And you say we're in it. We're fighting the good fight. Let's get back on the positivity side. I want your favorite player to call from junior hockey.
Sorry, what was that again?
Your favorite player to call from junior hockey.
From junior hockey? Wow,
From junior
geez,
hockey,
it.
and
Oh man,
that's a big Rolodex.
yeah. Wow. I mean, just I don't know whether I can narrow it down to one player. Brett Budgell obviously was a big piece here, as you said, on and off the ice in junior hockey. Daniel Sprong was a great name to call as well. Um, having the success that they've had over the last 5 years prior to this reset. There's just a number of great players. One of my favorite game calls ever um, would be the 1997 Royal Bank Cup in Summerside, where there was a current Halifax native, Harlan Hayes, who was the goaltending coach, I think, for as well when Halifax won the Junior A championship a few years later. But just broadcasting that game, a David and Goliath matchup, where Summerside had entered into the tournament, where they had been the Maritime champions, had gone to the Fred Page Cup, didn't have much success, didn't have a lot of success in the early going of the Centennial Cup in Summerside, but they did beat Northern Ontario and went into the semifinal series against Weyburn, Saskatchewan, which had about 20 players moving on to the NCAA in the following season, and they had finished top in the Royal Bank Cup tournament, and Summerside was to play them in the opening semifinal game, and it was just a unbelievable game where Harlan Hayes was lights out, and Mavs, when it gets down to it, if you are playing an opponent as far as hockey is concerned, if they happen to have a goaltender that gets dialed in and is playing lights out, it's not an automatic win anymore. And that's what happened with Summerside. They were the underdog by far. Weyburn was the best team in the tournament, which featured, NHL players like Scotty Gomez. And Harlan Hayes played lights out. I don't know, he stopped 45 or 50 shots, and it went into overtime. And the Weyburn goaltender, I still reference the point. I'm not sure what happened to him, but the face-off was to his stick side, and for some reason, he overplayed the face-off. He was deep into his crease to the post. 2/3 of the net was open. The white boys from Charlottetown, Mark and Mike, would win the face-off, and there would be half the net to fire it into in the overtime game of the semifinal of the national championship for the Royal Bank Cup. I still can't believe the net was open. Summerside put it into the open net. Goaltender dived to try to get back into the net, and it was game over. Next day they would go on and beat Surrey for the national championship. So that's that's something that I remember. That goal call there, which was so unexpected, and then of course, obviously, broadcasting in the NHL a number of games and goals that were called there. But there's just, man, when you've called as many, I'm just saying this, I've called a lot of names and a lot of players, and there's been some terrific highlights. There's no doubt. I can't name one particular player because, as I said here, you brought up Brett Budgell, terrific human being, terrific player for the Islanders. He scored some biggies here against Plainville in the playoffs. There's no doubt about that. But just too many players to really narrow it down to one. But I tell you what, I got a ton of enjoyment calling each and every one of them. Put it that way.
And I guess if we go to pro, what's some of your favorite memories from pro? Because we talked about the first one, and there's been plenty of goal calls, plenty of save calls, plenty of firsts with Columbus.
Well, you know what, and I see it as one of the. It's listed as one of the all-time great calls for the Jackets. They've sent me and it's nice that they don't forget about you. They send you a few clips that some stuff that you're involved with in the past. I know when Rick Nash retired here this past year, I think most of the calls were the radio calls that as they were raising Rick Nash's number up, which was nice. It caught me by surprise. Rick Nash would be, he would have a number of calls. The one in Phoenix where he zigged and zagged and dangled and dashed and dipped and drove the play from one end of the ice to the other individually, and then fired it and deked the goaltender and fired it into the open net against Phoenix. It certainly was a memorable call. Nicky Zheredev, top flight Russian, did a Bobby Orr type play where he circled in back of his own goal line. He went through the Chicago team, some players twice, and went into the goaltending, and of course would deke the goaltender out. And would be another game call that I know that is at the top end of what they do in Columbus as well, as far as uh, memorable goals being scored. But in Columbus there's a lot of great saves. Ron Tugnett was terrific, time and time again. Mark Denis as well as we moved on. Steve Mason, the year that I was there, they made the playoffs. Was a terrific goaltender for the Jackets as well. But just a lot of great personalities involved in the early years, because so many of the players were senior players at the time. They had a long track record of success in the NHL, but for whatever reason they were let go for the draft, and they wanted to prove a lot of people wrong. And we had a pretty entertaining couple of years to start out. We competed pretty good until obviously these players age out, and then you have to go with your draft picks and then try to reset things. But just man, I mean, Rick Nash is there, Sergei Fedorov is there. You got players like that, Adam Foote. There was a number of great individual players. It was fun calling them all, and I don't think, obviously, I don't regret the opportunity. I was blessed to give it. I was blessed to be given the opportunity. I had a couple of opportunities, not opportunities. I actually applied for a couple of jobs prior to Columbus. Doug McLean, who's a great friend of mine, told me, he said, George, you'll never get to the NHL because you never send anything out. And so, of course, I had all the resume, Mavs, I had it all set out. I had the tapes. I had all kinds of, background information on what I had done. I got down to the Final Four in Anaheim. I got down to the Final Four in Philadelphia. I came close to Tampa, but I found out later on, as Phil Esposito had talked to Doug and said that they were going to take a serious look at what I was doing, but I was from Canada. It was just as simple to hire an American. So, but then because of that, Doug gave me the opportunity in Columbus, which I will always appreciate. And you know what? To be quite honest, he didn't have to do that. He hired a number of Islanders and gave them a chance to experience the NHL experience. One time it was 5 from Summerside alone, and each and every one of them enjoyed the experience. But having said that, he really went out on the limb with me, because I was not a guy that you could put in the office or do something else. Unfortunately, every time I opened up my mouth, people were going to judge you, right? So he really went out on the limb, and I'll always appreciate that. It could not have worked out. Unfortunately, I think some people saw my hiring as one that, like, where is this guy coming from? And did I get off the whatever the local wagon? And am I just calling my first games? But I mean, obviously, Doug wouldn't have hired me if I had that limited experience, nor would it Anaheim or these other teams taking a look at me. But before going there, I had about 1,500 games under my belt quietly on PEI. And so going to the National Hockey League, as I said, it actually became an easier broadcast game to call, and moved into that situation. I mean, you have to have the type of personality and the energy level to be able to try to have your A game going all the time, because in those early years, there's an impression that you can make or not make with the fan base. And you got to be ready and prepared each and every night to do the best job you possibly can do, because they're evaluating you, and they're evaluating the product that you're trying to broadcast for. So I took it serious when I was there. I tried to come forth with the energy and be prepared as much as I can in every game that I possibly could do for them. And as I said, we built it up to 28 stations, and a lot of work and effort to do that, but just great memories. It was a unique experience to step in on the ground floor, where there were no doors locked to you. You could try anything you wanted to try, and then you would obviously respond to the feedback from that. But it's that special opportunity to work with an expansion franchise for the first time that gives you that openings, or those openings to work with. You wouldn't be able to do that with Toronto, Montreal, or the established teams. So we had an open book in Columbus, and it was fun, and it was certainly the highlight of my broadcasting career.
I do believe I've seen that photo of the 5 from Summerside.
Yes.
with the Columbus Blue Jackets. That's at
Hmm.
the PEI Sport Hall of Fame at the Summerside Rink.
Yes,
Um,
and that would be it. Yeah.
if we take Doug and Turk out of the equation, who are some of your favorite personalities behind the bench and off ice around the league for you to
Oh,
deal with?
well, man, great question. I mean, in Columbus, a number of great coaches. Dave King was special. He and his wife Linda at the start. They were. Dave's a terrific individual. Moving on from that, Todd Richards as well was terrific behind the bench. Gerard was there. Obviously, it said you take him out of the mix. Um, I mean, I remember a story with Mike Babcock, and he gets a lot of flack at times about how he deals with people. So I can remember coming into the night, coming into the broadcast, and he's going up into the booth and whistling or singing a tune of some sort, working in the NHL. It's not that bad, and I open up the door and set my kit bag in, and I'm getting all my paperwork done, and so anyway, I'm settling in, checking the audio levels on the gear, and getting my liquids ready to go for the game, and all that type of stuff. And I get a tap on the door, and big security guy, about 6'6" in a suit, steps in. And he says, "George," he said, "Yeah." He says, "Mike Babcock wants to see you." I said, "What?" I said, "Mike Babcock." I said, "What's he want to see the uh, me for as a broadcaster?" I said, "No, geez, what did I say wrong? Did I say something about his hair, or was I being a smartass on the radio?" I'm trying to quietly think, what the Lord did I say to Mike Babcock or about Mike Babcock? Anyway, I said, "Listen, tell Mike Babcock to come up here and see me." And the guy, the 6'6", yeah, like, "George, that's not going to happen." So I said, "Okay, give me a few minutes here to get my gear finished up here." And I'm trying to think as I'm saying, what the hell did I say about Mike Babcock? He said, "Anyway, George, I'll take you down." I said, "Okay." I said, "Are you going to stay with me?" And he laughed. Anyway, he took me down to the bowels of the arena, and I walked by the Jackets dressing room. I see our PR guy, Ryan Holton. I said, "Ryan, Mike Babcock wants to see me." I said, "What? You know what that's up about?" He said, "I don't know, George, but you screwed up." And I said, "Thanks for the vote of confidence, Ryan." Anyway, so anyhow, I walked by and he said, I look into the Detroit dressing room, and I'm trying to connect with a few people, and I'm just trying to see where Mike Babcock was, and I just said, "Is Mike Babcock around here?" And they said, "Just hold on, he'll be out in a minute or two." I said, "He wanted to see me." And they said, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm the Jackets radio play-by-play guy." So they said, "Okay, again, hold on." So there's a curtain in there, and in the dressing room, and so anyway, all of a sudden, swoosh, the curtain opens up. Out comes a charging Mike Babcock, and I'm in the middle of the doorway. And I said, "Uh-oh." I said, "The engine's loose. I better get out of the way." So anyway, he's coming towards me. Eyes are glued on me. So anyway, I slip back out the door. He blows by me, and he goes down the passageway towards the visiting bench. Turns around and says, "Come here." And I said, "Jesus, what did I say here anyway?" Because he doesn't look like he's a happy camper. So anyway, he comes down to the bench, and he stands on the bench, and I work my way down, not too actively. I take my time. I come down, and so he turns back to me, and he points his finger at my face. He says, "I want to tell you something." And I said, "Okay, Mike, what do you want to tell me?" He said, "I just saw your Voices series on TV, where they did a Voices segment on each city's play-by-play guy. They either take the radio guy or they would take the TV guy. In Columbus, they took me, the radio guy, to try to highlight a 30-minute segment on the NHL television network." I said, "Okay, Mike." He says, "George," he said, "listen, I don't listen to radio." He said, I listen to TV. He said, "I don't listen to radio." Uh, he said, "You know what? You don't do a bad job." I said, "Well, Mike, I appreciate that. And I'm still trying to think where this is going to go." And because, he was giving me a compliment, but yet he's going to kick me in the butt here. I can see this is coming. So he said, no. He said, the reason why I brought you down here. I said, yeah. He said, you know what? I watched your segment here down in my rec room the other night. And he said, I watched it for about 10 minutes. And I said, yeah, okay. And he said, then I put it on pause and I rewound it. And he said, I told my two boys, I said, you come down here. And he said, they came down. He said, now I want you to watch this guy. He said, this guy is just like your old man. He said, I keep telling you that you can't get anywhere without hard work. And you know my story. He said to my kids, he said, listen to this guy's story. And he said, he pressed play, and he said they watched the whole thing for the half hour. And he just wanted to congratulate me on putting in the time on the East Coast and getting to the National Hockey League, which I always wanted to do, which is the same thing that he actually did, coming from an education background, turning it into a pro career and getting to the level that he had gotten to. But that's the message that he wanted to give to his kids, that in fact, if you work hard enough, there's a chance you might get to where you want to go. But if you don't work, there's zero chance to get to where you want to go. And that was the point that he was making with his kids. So, I mean, there's stories like that with Mike Babcock, and most people are going to, try to hammer him most times, but that's how he handled me. And he went out of his way to congratulate me on getting to where I wanted to go. You don't hear all those side stories about Mike Babcock like that. Most of it's negative here recently on how he's handled a few things. That's not how I see Mike Babcock, and that's on a personal note.
Brother, that's the perfect way for us to put a nice bow on it. George, I appreciate you taking the time, my friend. It was great to chat with you, and hope to see you back over at Eastlink Center. Or
Well,
if you're on the road coming up on April 10th, we've got the Islanders and Eagles here on Eastlink.
it just, you were always, man, I just got a chance to meet you here in the last period of time here, as you're the pride and joy of Cape Breton broadcasting. And it was always fun having you in the building. You're a little bit, you've got a little bit of flair to your game, which I really, really like. I'm a little bit more conservative on my attire, but like you jump out at everybody in the arena with your attire, which is terrific. And I've always enjoyed your being in your same time frame. And as I said, Mavs, you and I, for the most part, seem to have the ability each and every night to see eye and eye with one another.
Yep, we certainly do have the ability to see eye and eye with each other. That is for sure. George, thanks again, brother.
Mavs, listen, great to be on with you, and good luck with this. Okay.
Thanks, man.
Okay. Take care.